The glass slipped from my hand at the worst possible moment. It wasn't even my fault. The tray tilted when someone bumped my elbow in the crowded ballroom. Champagne sprayed across the polished oak floor, catching the light like liquid gold. I froze, heart slamming against my ribs, waiting for the room to move on. But then I heard her voice, sharp as a blade, slicing through the chatter. "Clumsy girl," my mother hissed, her manicured nails digging into my arm. "Do you have any idea how this looks?" I opened my mouth to apologize, but her hand was faster. The slap wasn't loud, not like in the movies, but it stung like fire across my cheek. The room didn't stop. It didn't gasp. Just watched. 100 eyes in tailored suits and glittering gowns, their curiosity colder than the January air outside. My mother, Evelyn Carver, stood there in her emerald dress, her face a mask of composure, as if she hadn't just struck her only daughter in front of Chicago's elite. I didn't fall. I didn't cry. I just stood there, the heat of her handprint blooming on my skin, my pride cracking like thin ice. My older sister Lauren was across the room, her laugh tinkling over a glass of wine, her eyes deliberately elsewhere. She didn't move. Didn't even flinch. And that hurt worse than the slap itself. "Clean it up," my mother said, her voice low, final. She turned back to her guests, her smile snapping into place like a lock. I bent down, my black dress pooling around me, and picked up the shards of glass with shaking hands. A waiter handed me a napkin, his eyes averted as if my humiliation was contagious. I wiped the floor, my cheeks burning, my breath shallow. Then I stood, smoothed my dress, and walked out. My heels clicked against the marble hallway, each step a gunshot in my head. The Chicago skyline glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Carver Foundation's annual gala, but it felt like a cage, not a city. I pushed through the heavy glass doors into the freezing night. My breath fogged in the air, my fingers trembling as I fumbled for my car keys. I slid into my old Honda, the leather seats cold against my skin, and drove. No music. No tears. Just the hum of the engine and the weight of what had just happened. When I got to my apartment, I kicked off my heels and checked my phone. 42 missed calls. Not one from a friend, not one asking if I was okay. Every single one from my mother, her assistant, or the Carver estate. Each voicemail was a variation of the same theme. "Don't make this worse. Don't say a word. Fix your mistake." I dropped the phone onto the couch and pressed my fingers to my cheek, still tender. The mirror in my hallway showed a ghost of myself. Mascara smudged, lips pale, a faint red mark blooming where her hand had landed. I wasn't surprised. Not really. The Carvers were Chicago's untouchable dynasty, real estate, philanthropy, politics, all wrapped in a veneer of perfection. My mother, Evelyn, was the queen of it all, her name on every major donor list, her face on every society page. Lauren, my sister, was her polished air, always smiling, always agreeable, always perfect. Me. I was Nora, the younger one, the one they introduced with a tight smile and a warning glance. "Our Nora," they'd say, like I was a pet they hadn't quite trained. I'd grown up in a house where every move was calculated. My mother chose my clothes, my major, my words. When I was 12, my father died in a car accident, and whatever warmth was left in our home went with him. Evelyn became a machine. Obsessed with the Carver name, with control. Lauren learned to mirror her, to nod and smile and never make waves. I tried to do the same. I got good grades, studied art history at Northwestern, took a job at a small gallery downtown. Nothing flashy, nothing to embarrass the family. But to my mother it was never enough. "Art?" she'd scoffed when I told her about my job. "You're wasting your potential. Carvers don't curate. They own." I went to the gala because I thought I could prove I belonged. I wore a simple black dress, one my father had once said made me look like an artist. I smiled at donors, poured drinks when the staff got overwhelmed, stayed quiet while my mother and Lauren worked the room. For a moment I thought I'd done it, survived the night without a misstep. Then the tray tilted, the glass fell, and her hand found my face. The slap wasn't the beginning. It was just the moment the truth became undeniable. It was in the way she'd always spoken about me. Careless, emotional, disappointing. In private, in front of staff, in front of strangers. It was in the way Lauren never defended me, her silence louder than any words. It was in the years of dinners where I was invisible, the birthdays where I got criticism instead of cake. I'd spent my life trying to be small enough to fit into their world. But that night, as I sat on my couch, staring at the missed calls piling up, I realized I didn't want to fit anymore. I stood, my legs unsteady, and walked to my bookshelf. Behind a stack of old sketchbooks was a small leather-bound journal, its edges worn from years of hiding. I hadn't touched it since college. I opened it, the pages crackling. It wasn't full of dreams or doodles. It was a ledger of moments I'd tried to forget. Times my mother had cut me down, times Lauren had looked away, times I'd been told I was less. Dinner, June 2019. She said my degree was a waste, that I'd never amount to anything. Lauren laughed. Said I'd always be the dreamer. Christmas 2021. She gave Lauren a diamond necklace. I got a book on professional etiquette. Page after page, a quiet archive of a life spent shrinking. I grabbed a pen and turned to a blank page. At the top I wrote, the night she hit me. Then I started writing, where it happened, who was there, what she said, what Lauren didn't say. I didn't know what I was building yet, but it felt like the first step toward something solid. Something mine. The next morning my phone was at 68 missed calls. A text from my mother. This doesn't need to escalate. Call me. Another from Lauren. You're overreacting. Let's talk. I didn't reply. Instead, I got in my car and drove, not to work, not to the lakefront, but to a name I hadn't thought of in years. Aunt Mara. My father's sister, the one my mother called unstable, the one who'd walked away from the Carver fortune a decade ago. I'd heard whispers that she'd refused to play by Evelyn's rules, that she'd started a community arts program in a small town outside Chicago. She was the only person I knew who'd ever stood up to my mother and survived. Her address was in Evanston, a quiet street lined with old trees and brick houses. I parked, my hands still shaking, and walked to her door. The nameplate read M. Carver. I pressed the buzzer, my heart pounding. A long pause, then a voice, warm but cautious. Who's this? It's Nora, I said, my voice barely steady. I need to talk. The door clicked open. Mara stood there, her dark hair streaked with gray, her eyes sharp but kind. She looked at my bruised cheek, my tired face, and didn't ask questions. She just stepped aside and said, "Come in. I've been waiting for you." The story's getting more and more interesting, isn't it? Don't miss out on what happens next. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. Let's see what other challenges await our hero. Mara's apartment smelled of coffee and oil paint, a chaotic warmth that felt like the opposite of the Carver estate's sterile marble. We sat at her kitchen table, a chipped wooden thing covered in papers and half-finished sketches. My journal lay open between us, its pages a raw map of my life's wounds. Mara didn't touch it. She just looked at me, her eyes steady, like she was waiting for me to decide who I was going to be. "You didn't come here to hide," she said, sliding a mug of tea toward me. "So what are you here to do?" I didn't have an answer. Not yet. My cheeks still ached, a dull reminder of the gala, and my phone buzzed relentlessly in my pocket. Another text from my mother's assistant. "Meeting tomorrow, 10 a.m. Be there." I ignored it, but the weight of those messages pressed against my ribs like a bruise. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice small. I can't go back to being invisible." Mara nodded like she'd heard that before. She stood and pulled a cardboard box from under the table, its edges worn and labeled Carver Old. "Then let's start with what's real," she said, flipping it open. Inside were files, letters, faded photographs, and a USB drive taped to a yellowed envelope. "Your mother's built an empire on secrets. But secrets have roots, and I've been digging for years." I leaned forward, my pulse quickening. "What kind of secrets?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she handed me a document. A real estate transfer from 2015, a Carver-owned property in Lincoln Park moved to an offshore account. The numbers were staggering, millions shuffled quietly, no public record. "Evelyn's careful," Mara said. "But not careful enough." This was the first thread I pulled after I left. "There's more." I stared at the paper, my mind racing. The Gala slap wasn't just about me. It was part of something bigger, a pattern of control that extended beyond our family. But what? Why now? Mara's words hung in the air, incomplete, teasing at a truth I couldn't yet see. My fingers tightened around the journal. "What did she do to you?" I asked. Mara's jaw tightened just for a second. "She didn't hit me," she said. "She didn't need to. She used words, contracts, threats. When I refused to marry the man she picked, a donor's son, a business deal, she cut me out. Sold my share of the family trust, told everyone I was unstable. I was 28, Nora. I had nothing but a suitcase and a bus ticket." She paused, her eyes distant. "But I learned how to fight back." The USB drive caught my eye, glinting under the kitchen light. "What's on that?" I asked. She smiled, sharp and knowing. "Proof. But you're not ready for it yet. First, you need to decide what you're fighting for. Her words landed like a challenge. I didn't know what I was fighting for. Justice, freedom, revenge? All I knew was the journal in my hands, the slap on my face, and the silence of a sister who chose my mother over me. I opened my mouth to ask more, but my phone buzzed again. A voicemail this time from Lauren. Nora, don't do anything stupid. Mom's upset, but we can fix this. Call me. Her voice was smooth, practiced, like she was reading a script. I deleted it. Mara watched me, her expression unreadable. They'll try to pull you back, she said. They always do. But you've got something they don't. A spark. Don't let them snuff it out. That night I stayed in Mara's guest room, a small space with a sagging mattress and a window overlooking an alley. The walls were covered in old posters. Art exhibits, protest rallies, names I didn't recognize. I lay awake, the journal on the nightstand, its pages whispering questions I couldn't answer. What was on that USB drive? What had Mara found that made her so sure we could take on my mother? And what would happen if I did? By morning, the plan took shape over burnt toast and more coffee. Mara spread out her files across the table, a timeline of my mother's deals. Properties flipped, trusts hidden, donations tied to political favors. Evelyn's not just a control freak, Mara said, tapping a highlighted line. She's a chess player. Every move is calculated, including you. That slap? It wasn't about the champagne. It was about keeping you in line. I swallowed hard, my fingers tracing the journal's spine. So what do? We build a case, she said. Not just your story, but hers. Every time she hurt you, every time she silenced someone else. You've got the journal. I've got the paper trail. Together we make it undeniable. We spent the day sorting through her files. I wrote down everything I could remember. The gala, the way my mother's voice cut through me at dinners, the way Lauren's silence felt like a betrayal. I recorded her voicemail, saved it to Mara's laptop, encrypted it. Mara showed me how to search public records, pulling up Carver Foundation tax filings that didn't add up. One entry stopped me cold. A $2 million donation to a city council member's campaign, dated the day after a zoning law passed in Evelyn's favor. She's been buying influence, I whispered. Mara nodded. And burying anyone who notices. My phone buzzed again, another text from my mother. Final chance, Nora. Meet us tomorrow or you'll regret it. The words weren't a plea, they were a threat. I showed Mara, expecting her to tell me to ignore it. Instead she said, go. See what they're offering. It'll show you who they really are. The meeting was set for a private office downtown, a glass-walled room in a law firm that screamed money. I arrived early, my journal tucked in my bag, my heart pounding like it wanted to escape. Lauren walked in first, her blonde hair pulled back, her navy blazer crisp. She didn't meet my eyes, just sat across the table, her hands folded like she was at a board meeting. Then came my mother, Evelyn Carver, in a tailored gray suit, her assistant trailing with a leather folder. She didn't sit. She stood, looming, her presence filling the room like smoke. Nora, she said, her voice smooth as ice. You've caused quite a stir. You hit me, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. In front of everyone. Her lips twitched, not quite a smile. An overreaction. You embarrassed the family. I reacted poorly. Let's move past it. Move past it. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You humiliated me. Lauren stood there and watched. Lauren shifted, her fingers tightening. Nora, you're blowing this out of proportion. It was a mistake. A mistake. I turned to her. You didn't say a word. You let her do it. My mother cut in, her voice low. Enough. We're here to resolve this, not rehash it. She nodded to her assistant, who slid the folder across the table. This is a settlement. Sign it and we'll fund your gallery job for 5 years. You can live your little artist life quietly. I stared at the folder, its edges crisp, its weight heavy with promises and threats. And if I don't? Her eyes narrowed. You're not Mara. You don't have her resilience. Push this and you'll lose everything. Your job, your apartment, your name. I leaned forward, my voice low. You don't know what I'm capable of. Lauren spoke, her voice soft but firm. Nor think about it. You don't want to be alone. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the sister who'd once braided my hair, who'd whispered secrets under the covers. But that girl was gone, replaced by someone who'd chosen safety over truth. I'm not alone, I said. Not anymore. I stood, leaving the folder unopened. My mother's voice followed me to the door. "You'll come back, Nora. You always do." I didn't answer. I walked out, the glass doors closing behind me with a soft thud. Outside, the Chicago wind bit at my skin, but it didn't feel like defeat. It felt like fuel. Back at Mara's, I didn't need to explain. She saw my face and knew. "They offered you a cage," she said, not a question. I nodded. "And threatened to take everything if I don't get in." She handed me the USB drive. "Then let's make sure they lose more than you do." I plugged it in, my hand steady now. The screen lit up with files, emails, bank transfers, a recorded conversation between my mother and a city official. My breath caught. "What is this?" Mara's smile was fierce. The beginning of the end. The USB drive felt heavier than it should have, a tiny piece of plastic holding a decade of my mother's secrets. Mara and I sat at her kitchen table, the laptop screen glowing with files that could unravel the Carver empire. Emails to city officials promising mutual benefits. Bank transfers to untraceable accounts. A recorded call where my mother's voice, smooth and cold, offered a councilwoman a donation for a zoning vote. Each file was a brick in the wall we were building, not just to expose her but to free me. Mara leaned back, her eyes glinting with something fierce. "This is enough to shake her," she said. "But timing matters. We hit when she's most exposed." I nodded, my fingers tracing the journal's worn edges. The gala was 2 days away. The Carver Foundation's winter event, where Chicago's elite would gather to toast my mother's philanthropy. The irony wasn't lost on me. It was the perfect stage. But doubt gnawed at me. What if this wasn't enough? What if she spun it, buried it, turned me into the villain? My mother was a chess player and I was barely learning the board. Mara seemed to read my mind. "She's not invincible, Nora. She's just loud about it." She slid a business card across the table. "Elena Ruiz, investigative reporter, Chicago Tribune. I reached out last week. She's interested but she needs everything, your story, my files, the recordings. You ready to go public?" My throat tightened. Public meant no turning back. Public meant my mother's wrath, Lauren's betrayal, the world's judgment. But it also meant my voice finally heard. I nodded. "Let's do it." We spent the next day preparing. I wrote my story, not just the slap but the years of being erased. The dinners where my mother mocked my dreams. The Christmases where Lauren got praise and I got silence. The way I'd learned to shrink, to apologize for existing. I typed until my fingers ached, each word a release, each sentence a rebellion. Mara cross-checked the files, verifying dates, matching bank transfers to public records. We backed everything up on encrypted drives, sent copies to Elena, and set a release date. 7 p.m. the night of the gala, when my mother would be mid-speech. The morning of the gala, my phone buzzed with a new text from Lauren. "Don't do this, Nora. You'll ruin everything." I stared at it, my chest tight. Part of me wanted to call her, to ask why she'd chosen my mother's side, why she'd let me bleed alone. But I didn't. I deleted the message and turned off my phone. Mara drove us to the Tribune's office, a gray building dwarfed by Chicago's skyline. Elena met us in a cluttered conference room, her eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. She read my story, listened to the recording, scanned the files. "This is explosive," she said, her voice steady but urgent. "But it's also dangerous. Evelyn Carver has friends in high places. You sure you're ready for the fallout?" I thought of the slap, the missed calls, the folder they'd tried to buy me with. "I'm sure," I said. She nodded. "Then we go live tonight." The gala was held at a lakeside hotel, its glass facade reflecting Lake Michigan like a mirror. I didn't have an invitation, but I didn't need one. Mara and I stood in the lobby, blending with the crowd of reporters and curious onlookers. Inside, the ballroom glittered, chandeliers, champagne flutes, the hum of self-important laughter. My mother took the stage, her emerald dress catching the light, her voice booming about legacy and community. Lauren stood beside her, smiling, the perfect daughter. At 7:02 p.m., phones started buzzing. 1, then 10, then a chorus. Screens lit up with the Tribune's headline. Carver Foundation under fire. Allegations of abuse, corruption. My story was there, raw and unfiltered, alongside the emails, the transfers, the recording of my mother's voice promising favors. The room shifted, a ripple of whispers turning into a wave. A donor set down his glass. A woman in pearls walked out. My mother's smile faltered, her eyes scanning the crowd, searching for the leak. Then she saw me. Her gaze locked on mine through the glass doors, her face a mask of fury. She didn't stop her speech, but her voice tightened, her words stumbling. Lauren touched her arm, whispering something, but my mother shook her off. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every crack in her composure. I didn't stay. I turned and walked out, Mara at my side, the cold air sharp against my skin. My heart pounded, not with fear but with something new, power. For the first time, I wasn't running from her. I was rewriting the story. The fallout came fast. By morning, the Carver Foundation was trending on X, with hashtags like #CarverExposed and #NoraSpeaks. Donors pulled funding. A city council member announced an investigation. My mother released a statement calling the allegations a misunderstanding, but the audio of her voice was too clear, the documents too damning. Lauren called once, left a voicemail. I didn't know it was this bad. I didn't call back. I moved into a studio apartment above a coffee shop in Wicker Park, its walls bare but mine. No chandeliers, no marble, just creaky floors and the smell of espresso drifting up from below. I painted the walls blue, hung a sketch I'd drawn in college. A girl standing in a storm, unbroken. Mara visited, bringing books and stories of her own rebellion. You did what I couldn't, she said one Sunday, her voice soft. You didn't just walk away. You burned it down. I started volunteering at a women's shelter, teaching art classes to survivors. They'd draw their fears, their hopes, their truths. One woman, barely older than me, asked, "How do you stop being afraid of your own voice?" I told her, "When you realize it's the only thing they can't take." A month later, an envelope arrived, no return address. Inside was a note in my mother's handwriting. "You think you've won, but you've lost your family." I folded it, dropped it in a drawer. I wasn't proud of breaking the Carvers. I was proud of building myself. That night, I sat by my window, the Chicago skyline blinking through the fog. I opened my journal, its pages heavy with the past. The first entry still read, "The night she hit me." I flipped to the last blank page and wrote, "The night I stopped being hers." Then I closed the book, not to bury it but to start a new one. Because I wasn't Evelyn Carver's daughter anymore. I was Nora, and that was enough. Hey everyone. Thanks for tuning into the Revenge Tempest channel. If you love this story, please hit that subscribe button and join our amazing community. Drop a comment below letting us know where you watched us from. Your support keeps us going. Stay tuned for more epic tales.